Oh, hi. Welcome to Say It, I Dare You, the podcast where we pull apart the personal meanings of taboo and hard to say words and phrases with lovely guests and some gentle peer pressure. Today, we are talking about the word fat. The kicker here is that we're not talking about this word as if it's an insult. We're talking about a word that in dictionary terms simply means having more fat, like the noun, like your literal tissue, on your body than average. As an adjective, though, this word means a lot more and it holds way too much power. So today's goal is to chat through the why and the how, probably work through some collective hurt together if you were raised in the early 2000s like me, and chuck that stigma out the door. I'm Quinn, and it is with so much pleasure that I introduce today's episode guest, Sarah Scott. Hey, Sarah.
Hello, hello.
Sarah is an ex-diet culture, self-titled fat girl who is healing and growing in real time on Instagram. You should follow her. It will be linked. She's an office manager by day, and in her free time, she creates content that seeks to show everyone that they are worthy of acceptance at any size and to normalize just talking about bodies on the internet. Sarah, although it's really clear from your incredible and vulnerable content online, can you tell me more about why you relate to this episode topic and your thoughts on the word fat in general?
Oh boy, yes. So, growing up, fat was not a good thing. Fat was a scary word. It was a scary thing to be. I spent so much time and effort not being fat, although I wasn't quite clear what fat exactly was.
Yeah.
I just knew it was bad. I didn't want to do it. And so all the way through my 20s, I was constantly trying not to be fat. I spent a lot of time and pressure, and then in my late 20s and early 30s I gained a whole bunch of weight, and that's actually what I needed to kind of like click for me, that being fat, as in like physically a bigger person in a bigger body, is not actually what I thought fat was. Right? I gained a bunch of weight and I realized I'm still the same person. I wasn't any happier when I was skinny. In fact, I was quite a bit happier when I was fat.
Yeah.
And so what fat meant to me was someone who's dirty, who was lazy, who was not good enough, who was not worthy. And then I had to become fat to realize that's not at all the case.
Yeah.
And that you can be all of those things. You can be worthy, you can be loved at any size.
Yeah.
So now fat is a descriptor for me. And someone can say, someone can describe someone as fat. We'll get to a little bit of a discussion about, like, you have to choose your moment. You might not just want to walk up to someone and say they're fat. You have to double check the use of the word. But for me, it's a descriptor. I'm also tall. I also have blue eyes. We both have blue eyes, right?
Yeah.
You can start finding similarities. I'm tall. I'm cute. I like to talk. All of these things.
Yeah. And to get rid of that meaning behind the word, it takes a lot of work internally. I even transparently, when we prep for these episodes, I ask for kind of a self-written bio, and Sarah sent it to me, and she called herself a fatty in the bio. And I'm the one that says these out loud, and it made me skip a beat. I was like, I can't call her that. Like, it's my words. And then I was like, no, Quinn, that's the whole fucking point of this podcast is to just say it and let it have less meaning and less power behind that word. But even I still get stuck in that, like, well, what does it mean? Does she think it's an insult? But even though you and I have had this discussion already. So growing up, when you say this whole, like, I didn't really know what fat meant, you talked about the words lazy, you talked about the words like unmotivated. Right. Can you tell me more about, like, those experiences and just what you think creates those thoughts about the word fat?
Oh, well, I was born in the 90s. So
there it is. That's the answer.
There's not really, I think, so I grew up in a diet household.
Me too.
I think if you're on TikTok, you'll know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, almond mom.
Yes. My dear mom absolutely was an almond mom. And so was her mom, and so was her mom, right? So she grew up feeling that she always had to be thin and, like, achieve this beautiful body that's muscular and absolutely unattainable for a person with a normal life and a normal job, and not possible, but this was always the ideal. And my mom is 5'2", I think.
Okay.
And so by the time I was an early teenager, I was 6 feet tall.
Yeah.
And obviously totally different body shape. Even as a child, I was, like, bigger and chubbier and taller than a lot of my peers and a lot of my siblings. And so my idea of what fat was a little bit skewed. Because no matter what, even though I was 10 years old on a diet, weighing myself and trying to lose weight, I was never that like slim, slender, small, petite, little blonde person that I wished I could be, right? Yeah, I felt I lost my train of thought.
That's okay.
There's more coming, but
that's okay.
we'll
I was
get
gonna
there.
say like in a similar experience, it's like what I wished I could be, and also what my mom wished I could be.
Right.
And I think I say this with so much understanding that the intention was to be healthy, to be accepted, to fit into society. But I too was like kind of always the biggest kid in the room growing up, and I'll never forget that feeling, because that the goal was just to not be that one, which sucks, because then somebody else is, and somebody else is feeling that way, and it's really not that big of a deal.
Right.
But yeah.
And not to be unique. I think maybe that's an experience of all kids, right?
Yeah.
You just want to fit in, you want to be normal. And
yeah.
For me, I remembered what I was going to say. For me, it was super intertwined with my sexuality as well. So I grew up in a very religious household. Sexuality wasn't really something we talked about. It was definitely not encouraged.
Right.
And so as a young woman who suddenly started developing a lot sooner than all of my slim siblings and peers, suddenly I had to start wearing a bra early. And I was like, what does that mean? That's a scary thing. I don't like that. And I had to start I was asked to like hide my body, and somehow I felt ashamed, and somehow fat became intertwined with sexuality, and
interesting,
terrifying to me.
Yeah.
I was terrified. I didn't know anything about it. Like,
Yeah.
I don't really know what sex is. Like, help.
Yeah. And then you just get a training bra and off you go. Yeah.
And like, you have to wear loose dresses now. Like, why? I don't get it.
Yeah. And then it's all about, because people will look, and then I had a very similar experience. I got my period very, very early. I got boobs before everybody else. And I had like a gym teacher tell me to wear 2 sports bras in grade 4. And I'm like, why are you looking? Now looking back on it, I'm like, that's a you problem. But at the time it was just, oh shit, people are looking at my body, and my body's not good enough.
Right.
Or it's earlier than it should be, or it's bigger than it should be, or different from my peers.
Yeah.
It's isolating. It's really isolating. So what is your experience with kind of diet culture? You said you were dieting at 10. Girl, same. But talk to me about that experience for you.
So yeah, the pursuit of weight loss was a life goal for me. As a child, as a teenager, it was really, really encouraged in my family and in my household. But then even as an adult, I took it to new extremes. So at the cost of any other parts of my health, I just wanted to lose weight. I wanted to be thin. I think I've been on a diet from about, 10 or 11 until 26, 27, with sometimes months here and there in between. But what kind of developed was like a long-term binge restrict cycle of disordered eating. Yeah. We'll kind of vaguely call it that, because I was never diagnosed with an eating disorder. But it's so prevalent right now that it's hard to diagnose someone unless they're like severely ill. And I was never ill. Sometimes, you get to the point where I would eat, I think when I was like 20 years old, like, oh, I'll have a spoonful of peanut butter and I'll be fine for the day. No.
Yeah.
Of course you're not fine for the day.
Yeah.
You're going to pass out, and your brain is going to be foggy, and
you're
not going to have any of the nutrients you need.
Yeah. You might not be near death, but your hormones are everywhere. You can't handle anything. Yeah.
So on and on and on. And I multiple times achieved the weight that I wanted to be, but was never satisfied with how I looked. Yep. And I was like, well, I must have to lose more weight, because I don't love myself. And I know I would be happy, and I know I would love myself if I could just lose the weight. But that may not come as a surprise, given what we're here to talk about. That didn't actually happen.
That wasn't the answer.
It was not the answer.
It wasn't. I feel like a lot of people, as I kind of poked fun at the beginning of this intro, being like, well, if you grew up in the early 2000s, you share this feeling. And when I look at kind of Gen X and the area of what would be our mother's generation, my heart breaks. I still I work with a few Gen X's. I'm friends with a few Gen X's, and it's just, you get the stomach flu, and they're like, well, you dropped a few pounds. I'm like, no, wrong answer. But it's so ingrained in their lives, and therefore unintentionally right in front of us as children. And diet culture, I think a lot of the things that people don't talk about, or what we don't understand, is that especially in that time frame of us growing up, it wasn't about education about food. We didn't know macros. We didn't know what fueled us and what didn't. It was bad or good, and nothing in between. And it has really kind of braided itself into how we talk about even food now.
Oh, yeah.
And it's, as someone who loves food, can be really hard to undo, because what is bad food? Unless it tastes bad, in which case get something new. It's not bad food, you know?
Oh, it's so intertwined into like morality. There's this morality and like hierarchy of goodness around food and weight and dieting, and like someone in the office might be like, oh, you know, I've been on this diet, and everyone believes them to be a better person because they could stick to their diet.
Yes.
Or because I never eat anything processed. Like, whoo, you're a better person.
Yeah,
like,
congratulations.
You're closer to heaven or something. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so proud of you. Why are you doing it? But
Right.
Go forth. I have found recently I have dropped weight recently. I don't own a scale. There's no rhyme or reason behind it. I got super into a certain sport and it just happened. And I purposely don't own a scale. I purposely don't think about it. But you know who does? Everyone else who has seen my body. And I'm like, why are people constantly talking about it? Ask me what I'm eating. Ask me what I'm doing. I'm like, that's none of your business.
Yeah.
And it's such an experience with diet culture. People want to know how they can do it. I'm like, just get neurodivergently interested in something, apparently is the answer. But the culture, the hyper focus on it really, really did that for me. See, I even was about to say did me well, and there is no well. That's the wrong answer. It's not, there was no intention, and it's not better or worse that I'm in the position that I'm in. But other people are congratulating me.
Right.
It's a weird feeling as someone
100%.
who has been through the whole diet at 10 situation.
Yeah, it felt a little bit, there was sadness. I remember crying to my sister about when I gained weight. I gained weight pretty rapidly just before the pandemic, and then also a little bit more during the pandemic because I sat at home for a year or two. But I like the difference between how people would treat me, strangers on the street, just a little bit different, just enough that I noticed, right? When I was blonde and like conventionally sized, people would be more likely to smile and nod and just interact pleasantly on their face, right? But when you gain a bit of weight, or quite a bit of weight in my case, and this is my natural hair color, I went back to it during the pandemic, and
looks great on you.
A little bit different. Thank you.
That breaks my heart to hear you say.
Isn't
And
it awful?
in small increments, I've had this conversation similarly. I'm like, more people hold the door for me now, and I don't know what it means, but I feel like it means something. And maybe we're thinking too hard, but
maybe, yeah.
But also that is your experience. Even if we are, that is your experience, and it's hard to imagine that you as like the beautiful person that you are is thought of any differently because your hair's not blonde or because you're a different size.
Yeah, it's kind of sad.
It is.
But it's good to talk about it and to notice it. Like, this is interesting. I wonder why.
Yeah.
And for me, unpack, like, why did it matter so much that strangers were validating me? Something to think about.
Oh, yeah, there's more to that.
Yeah.
We'll get there. So do you feel like as a society we have gotten better with diet culture from, 2003 hellscape?
I want to think so. Yeah. I believe in us.
Yeah.
I know we can do it.
it.
I think like recently there's kind of social media trends about I forget now, like there's all sorts of things like, do you have legging legs and stupid things like this. The kids on TikTok they're really young now and they're getting exposed to that, and that's really scary. And I think we need to keep the good fighting.
It's like the 2024 version of like Tumblr thigh gap era.
Yeah, exactly.
Terrifying.
But I do think there's more diversity of body size in like pop culture. I was watching Bridgerton last night. Yeah. So like in this season, the main character, she's fat. Yeah. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. And like having a main character actually have character development, actually fall in love, and not just be kind of the one on the outside. That's pretty cool to see. I don't know if you watched Baby Reindeer.
I have not. It's on my list.
Oh, you have to.
I've been told.
So good. But the woman in it, I won't give anything away, but the woman is fat, and that is not discussed whatsoever in the whole show. It's amazing.
What a breath of fresh air.
And she's so good at her role.
Well, because growing up, the fat characters were the best friend, the funny one who was never loved, and like it was so obvious that was their character.
I know.
Like storyline. And for what?
Right? Yeah.
That's exciting. I'll have to watch it. So in society,
need
you know, you and I were talking about kind of this curatorial version of online presence and how things like Instagram can be really nice because you can just be like, I don't want to see that anymore. Goodbye. One, a lot of people don't know how to do that or don't have the boundaries to be able to for themselves. But two, not every platform does that.
Yeah.
I worry, and I guess this is a question about whether or not you've thought about this, is that maybe we just surround ourselves with the right kind of people, and it is more prevalent in other spaces. Do you feel like you've noticed that, or that it is actually a kind of systemic change?
That's a really good question. I know we were kind of talking about this before. For me, on my Instagram specifically, who I follow is really matters to me, right? I want Instagram to be the space that I can go to where I can learn about new perspectives, but it's all focused on body size, body neutrality, body positivity. That's who I want to follow because I want to go to that space and that's what I want to learn about.
Yeah.
But it's also important to have other spaces where you learn about different things,
Yeah.
right? Like when the George Floyd stuff was happening in 2019, I was just still getting right into the beginning of body positivity and what does it mean and what is it and am I okay with how my body looks and all of that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a little bit of a parallel there, right? And so starting to follow fat influencers who were Black women, like, now I can follow them, but like acclimatizing myself to that a little bit, but not necessarily only that, right?
Yes.
I needed a mixture of that for me. So you do need a space, I think, where you're going to be challenged, you're going to be introduced to new ideas, but also you need to reserve your energy a little bit.
Yeah.
So we need to have a balance. I think it's hard to tell. It's really hard to tell, right?
It's a big question. In your world, in your inner circle, do you feel like it's better for you as a fat person? Are you having a better experience now? Maybe that's because you are better and not because the people around us are, but
that's a good question. Yeah, I think like I find myself significantly happier. I mean, there's lots of factors, but I am fat and I'm way happier than I've ever been, right? Yeah. I also went to therapy. I also have a great job that I love. I also, but
right.
But that may well be part of it, right? I feel that I've come into myself a little. I've also turned 30, so that also helps, right?
Okay.
There's a lot more confidence, less insecurities, just generally.
Yeah.
I think that, so most of my friends are not plus sized. Some of them are like a little bit, maybe they feel uncomfortable in their body because they don't have like the perfect magazine body or whatever, but most of them are not. So we get to have cool conversations about that. We get to talk about, hey, that word fat, is it okay if I say that you're fat? And like, it matters a lot on the context, you know? If it's a descriptor,
yeah. If you're just like throwing it to hurt me, like what for? yeah.
Like if it's, I don't know, if I broke your chair and we thought it was funny, yeah, of course it's because I'm fat, because I sat on the chair and it was too heavy. But like if you describe me to your friend, oh, she's the fat girl, I don't think I would like that very much, you know?
It's contextual about, what is the purpose? I'm ticking into my own experience of like using the word gay here. And it's like, it really depends on if you're saying like, oh my God, that's so gay. Like when you saw a rainbow, it's like, oh, fun, gay. But if you're like, that's fucking gay, then you're talking about a different thing. It's hard to explain to people though, the difference, right?
Right. It's a bit nuanced. And like for some of my friends, I've given them the permission, like about me, you can use the word, but don't say that to a stranger in the grocery store. Like that's going to be seen as an insult still, despite the fact that like, oh, we can reclaim the words and all of these things. But it really depends on the context. It really does. Yeah.
Well, and it's a reclaiming of your own understanding, not a reclaiming to then be able to use it when the whole world hasn't changed. Yeah. And we know, you know, the power of it. The friends that are asking you like, oh, is it okay if I use that as a descriptor? Sound like great people who understand the power of why it's important to ask someone like you those questions. You, the person with that experience, deserve to get those answers out.
Right.
But not everybody has the same experience,
right,
or has gone through the same healing that you have. So you use the word body positivity. It's a hashtag we've all seen. I want to know what it means to you.
That's a great question. I think body positivity is often interchangeable with like body neutrality for me, which is also a term maybe not everybody's heard before. So body positivity or body neutrality for me is just accepting that my body looks the way it looks And if I think of like myself and my body as two different things, having a conversation, I can tell my body, wow, thank you so much for doing all this work to like take care of me. Even though for 20 years, almost 20 years, I didn't listen to you and I didn't feed you properly and did all the things, but you were always trying to like keep me safe. Yeah. Oh, that makes me emotional.
Yeah, me too. I was like, I'm not gonna cry. I'm not gonna cry.
No, we're both criers. There's no once one starts,
we're done.
Yeah, so being able to like recognize that my body is actually trying, like it's on my side. It's trying to help me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And thinking, generally just thinking positively. Like, I don't know if everybody has this, but I imagine most of us do. You walk past yourself in the mirror and you're like, oh, I look good today.
Yeah.
You know? And then you walk past again on your way out. You're like, oh my God, no.
Yeah.
I don't know. Or some days you're just like, wow, I hate everything. My clothes don't fit right. I feel icky in my body. I don't want this.
Yeah.
But then the next day or the next week you wear the same outfit and it would have changed, right?
Yeah.
So body positivity is recognizing that you can have bad body days and you can be feeling uncomfortable about yourself, but it doesn't actually change how you feel about your body and how you treat it.
Yeah. There's there's a core understanding of what your body is, and
Yeah.
then there's like my PMS voice can shut the fuck up, because I know that from the inside out there's a neutrality about it.
Yeah.
I didn't realize this was kind of a thought process of mine, but listening to you speak and kind of recognizing like body positivity as a personal thing, do you have any thoughts or I guess like words on what body positivity means outwardly towards other people or from other people towards someone like you? Did that
That's
question
a really
make
good
sense?
question. I think so. I think so. Like if you search body positivity on Instagram, what's going to come up is a bunch of like normal sized white women.
Yes.
That's what's going to come up, right? but actually, the body positivity movement was rooted in like Black queer women from the States who are like, it's about body autonomy. It's about making your own choices. It's about recognizing that just because you don't fit into the like white beauty standard doesn't mean that you're not beautiful and that you're not worthy. And like, it's rooted in this like rich history, right? It's been a little bit co-opted, I think is the word.
Yeah.
So, and I recognize I'm part of that, right? It wasn't made for me. Body positivity movement is not made for me as a white woman of any size, right?
Yeah.
But it's had a really positive impact for me. So I think sometimes when people hear body positivity, they're like, oh, it's just because they've been told, disclaimer, this is not true. I don't believe this. But they think, oh, it's just people saying it's okay to eat whatever you want and gain weight and just be fat and lazy, right?
Yeah.
That's what they think.
Yeah.
But like really, if anyone could choose to be thin, they would. They would do it in the like. Yeah, I think that's what people think it is.
Yeah.
Right. So then sometimes you can see it when you talk about, I talk about body positivity on the internet, and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, great.
Yeah.
Here's another fat girl that thinks that everything's fine, but that's not what it means to me.
Yeah.
Right. I think maybe there's a bit of education to be done and a bit of recognition that someone who's like body checking on the internet or talking about how much weight they've lost using that hashtag is like, well, no, that's not actually quite where we're at. Yeah.
You missed the mark.
Yeah.
You missed the mark.
Quite there.
Yeah.
I think I only answered half your question and now I got lost.
That's
in
okay.
my
That's
own
okay.
thoughts.
You brought up a really, I think, common experience of, I mean, I'm tired of having this conversation, but I'll do it. I'll keep doing it. But the whole, as you mentioned, like, oh, it just means they're lazy. They can't stop eating or they can't work out enough. It's like, one, none of your business if that is the truth.
Yeah.
And two, you don't have any understanding of this person's life, wants, needs, health.
Yes.
And to body positivity, at least from my perspective, is also being neutral about other people's bodies, which is hard when you've had your own experience of diet culture because you're constantly aware of bodies. Yeah. But to look at someone thin or not and be like, I hope you're happy and healthy, and not, oh, I wish I looked like that, or, oh, I don't want to look like that, or, oh, well, they're bigger than me, or I'm the biggest person in the room. To stop that internal monologue of giving a shit about other people's bodies is hard, I will admit, because I still do it.
Yeah.
But I think it's a really important part of that body positivity, body neutrality movement is also like mind your business. You know?
100%. And like just being careful how you compliment people. It's so ingrained in us to be, when we think someone looks great, instead of saying, you look great, you look so energetic, or you look happy, say, have you lost weight?
Yes.
Well, we say that, but we do. Yeah. And like, I have to physically stop myself. Even if I've noticed a friend has lost weight or gained weight, don't comment on it.
No.
Why does it matter?
Well,
you know?
The interesting thing about that is that unless you have like a close, intimate relationship with someone, like a very best friend or a partner, you're not commenting, oh, you gained weight.
Right.
So why are you doing it for the other way?
That silence is deafening.
It's deafening. It
when
is.
When everyone's like, oh, you've lost weight. And then you gain it. And they're like, how
are
you?
Yeah. There's not, you look great. And it's like, damn it. You didn't. It's celebrated. That's as someone, as I said, as someone who has recently lost some weight. I don't know how much. I don't own the scale. People are celebrating. I'm like, I'm not. I don't want to hear it. It's not, you didn't say anything when I gained it. And so don't say anything now. It's interesting, that silence. I've never really thought about it in too much depth, and now I'm having an existential crisis about it. I wanted to kind of pivot into like, you know, you talked about walking down the street and kind of like this assumption of how strangers are treating you and how it affects the way you walk through this world. So how does being fat affect the context of you interacting with the world, with someone like your employer or in school or with friends or in healthcare?
It's a really good question. I haven't found a lot of difference in the way people treat me, which is really wonderful.
I just got goosebumps.
Yeah. I read about on the internet that people are treated differently by their doctor or treated differently at work, and it's hard to get a promotion or be successful. And I was scared about that going back to the office after COVID. I was like, oh no, I'm in a new team and I haven't met them all in person, and what if this impacts my career? But I haven't noticed that at all. I am super lucky to have a family doctor and also to have a family doctor who is very subtly body positive. He's like health at any size kind of practice. So he'll be like, I'm willing to talk to you about health and I'm willing to talk to you about weight. Anything you want. But those are two different conversations. So we'll talk about them separately. I was like, oh my God, can I record you saying that?
Yeah,
you know?
seriously.
Amazing.
Other people need to know that people like you exist. Yeah.
Yes. A little bit on the internet. You'll get comments sometimes, requested DMs, but everybody gets requested DMs of like, I don't know, trying to be a sugar daddy or I want to sell you something. So just block.
Yeah,
just
all
block
of our old high school friends who are somehow now in an MLM.
Hey, girl.
I'm glad that joke landed. I kind of worried that I was like, maybe that's just me growing up in London, Ontario.
I want to tell you something.
Yeah, here we are. We're going into Arbonne after this talk. I'm thankful to hear that. I prepped that question, having heard those same experiences online, having had some of those same experiences, but I feel a sense of happiness, I guess, to think that there is a voice of a fat person going on the internet going, it also doesn't happen sometimes. Yeah. It's also gonna be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really nice. So I'm like hesitating because I didn't ask my partner if I can talk about this ahead of time, but we'll ask him after.
Yeah.
My partner had never dated anyone who was fat, plus size whatsoever. Anyone in the past that he dated had a really small body. And so I was nervous going into it, and it's like, do you need to talk about it? Are you nervous? And he said, no, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm falling in love with who you are, your confidence, the inside. Like, so sweet, right? But also, like, I think he meant it. Yeah. And it wasn't a factor in our relationship. It hasn't been a factor in our relationship. Yeah. We're both pretty tall. He's a tiny bit taller than I am, but like body wise, I'm much larger than he is, and that hasn't been a factor. So what? You're two people. You're in a partnership, and one's bigger than the other. Yeah. I know this theoretically, but does it come into our relationship all the time because of my insecurities? 100%. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
But it's nice to know, like I said, like to hear the voice of someone being like, but the experience is also positive. The experience is all, like, and like, I'm saying this with a grain of salt because I don't mean it in like the shitty way that people say it, but it's in your head. Yes. As in, like, I'm not saying it's all in your head, get over it, Sarah, but I'm saying it's your history, it's your upbringing, it's your societal experience as someone your size, but it doesn't mean that everyone else is going to be as cruel to you and your body as you have been. And thank God for that.
More send me for that, for sure.
Yeah.
Even still, despite posting all over the internet and talking about it with everybody, it's still there.
Of course.
It's still so there. Yeah. And like the pursuit of health always seems to lead back to weight. And size. And yeah, you have to kind of talk yourself out of it some days. Or just say, look, today's not the day that I'm going to think about that. We're going to put that aside and we're going to focus on body neutrality, just accepting and move on. And it's usually it's usually an emotional thing, right? For me, it comes down to, am I worthy? Am I worthy of love? And that's what it's about. When I'm like, I feel fat. Fat's not a feeling. You can't feel fat, but you can feel unworthy. Yeah. And that's what it's about.
And that's a really difficult feeling to move through. Yes. But it sounds like we can do it in different ways. You can do it in going, fuck that thought. I don't want that in my space today. You can do it in going, and so what? I feel fat today. I know that there's an inner part of my body that feel fat, air quotes, feel fat. There's a part of my being that also knows that there's nothing wrong with that. And there's different ways of moving through it. Sometimes it is eating what you want, and sometimes it is, eating a salad because you're like, maybe the demons beat me today. You know what I mean? And I say salad again neutrally. Like, I'm saying that as like the joke of like, that's what skinny girls eat. Like, no, it's not also. But also, it's what fat people eat. It's what people eat. If you're a salad liker, you eat salad. It's that neutral. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We could spend like hours talking about food, right? I mean, partly we both love food, but also like the way food and eating and disordered eating is so factored into the word fat. Yeah. When it's not always necessarily the only thing. It's part of it. Absolutely. Of course, what you eat is going to impact what your body looks like, but not entirely. There's so many other things. There's genetics. There's how many years you spent on a diet and how you maybe messed with your, I've forgotten the word right now, but you messed with your body a little. It's confused. Yeah. We're no longer in starvation, but sometimes it doesn't know that. Yeah, seriously. It's hard. It's hard in like a heartbreaking way to look back on people like us, the age that we're on, and being like, and how many diets have we done and for what? Like, to be in the position I'm in now, I look back on that going, what did I do that for if not to hurt my body and my brain? Right. And have so much to recover from. And for what? For a few pounds? Yeah. Because really, like, we talk about health, and health is holistic. Health is your mental health. Health is your physical health, yes, but it's also your hormones, how your body processes food now, how your brain processes food. If you can't have a meal without thinking really hard about your self-worth, you are less healthy than you think you are because you're eating a salad. That's not health. Yeah. You know? Yeah. 100%. I want to know, I know you have these conversations in such a beautiful way online, as you've said with your friends, between you and I want to know in what ways you feel like being fat is misunderstood by people, even the best of intended people having this conversation. Yeah, good question. I think there's a misunderstanding about a few different things. So, like, I call myself like an X-diet fatty, I think is what I told you. Yeah. And so when people hear X-diet, they think I just sort of binge eat every day, all day, right? It's like, there's no rules about life anymore. We just eat what we want. And that's not the case about someone who's fat. Everybody who's fat has a totally different experience, right? So I think there's assumptions made about lifestyles for sure, because it really depends, right? There's people who live in a fat body who are more active by far than people who live in thin bodies. So I think there's a lot of assumptions made about like health and lifestyle at a glance, and it's not really any one person's fault, right? We're all surrounded by that. I'm still battling that within myself, and I'm literally living with it every day, right? So I get that. I think Yeah, I've lost my train of thought again. Tell me the question again.
Misunderstood. How do you feel misunderstood?
I think I talk about it so much that people around me don't misunderstand me.
As you should. As you should.
Like if anyone has a question, I'm like, let me tell you. Like,
Yeah.
oh God, no, Sarah. Not
Let me
again.
just dive into the history of it too. Yeah. Not again. That is, I personally think, given obviously what this whole podcast is, the way to frickin' do it is to talk about it.
Yeah.
Because if you're keeping it in, it stays there and it does nothing. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't change you. It doesn't change other people.
Mm-hmm.
It just hurts. And I love that about you. I always joke, I feel like you'll resonate with this, that I'm like, when people are like, oh, well, did you talk about it? I'm like, oh yeah, I don't shut the fuck up. I talk about the things that I think about. If I have a thought, it's coming out of my mouth. So don't worry, you won't misunderstand me. But what a beautiful way to think about the hard things too. You know?
Yeah.
Because you don't need to be misunderstood. People just need to know. It's about learning and knowing. I want to know what you would say to young diet culture Sarah. Sorry to put the mirror in front of you and make you maybe cry.
That's okay.
But if you could talk to her, knowing what you know now, what type of thing would you say to her?
This was like a couple of years of therapy that they were trying to get me to talk to she was trying to get me to talk to my inner child. And I was like, I can't do that. I'm going to cry too much. Yeah. It's going to be okay. You're worthy of love at any size, no matter how you look. And also other people are going to find you beautiful. You're going to find yourself beautiful.
Yeah. You are a very beautiful person, inside and out. And it's a relieving thing as someone who knows you and cares for you to hear you also say it. Because a lot of people can't get there.
Right.
A lot of people can't get there.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you still have days where you can't get there.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's okay. Now I'm gonna cry. Thank you for saying that.
Oh man.
Thank you for sharing that vulnerability. I want to wrap it up by kind of going back to that language, the word at hand, the power that it has. Now I guess you've told this story throughout this conversation anyway, but in a more succinct way, how have you gotten to that point where you've desensitized the word fat for yourself? And I ask this in the plight to let other people listening in on how they can protect their hearts and their bodies and their minds and their lives.
Yeah. I think it was a combination of things. So one thing for sure that was really helpful for me was to follow people on social media that were in bigger bodies than me, that were in different bodies than me, that were in like disabled bodies, fat bodies, all types of colored bodies, all the things, right? So that was a big way to desensitize it. And I had to kind of try it out, right? Do I prefer calling myself plus size? Do I prefer calling myself fat? And I haven't really landed. I use them interchangeably. It's fine. When we're talking about clothes and fashion, plus size fits better. But if we're talking about, if I'm trying to emphasize that, like, no, I am happy this way and this is my body and I love it, fat usually is like a good word. It kind of shocks people also, right? It's like, no one's comfortable in the room when you say that.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah.
So it can be a little funny, right? Shake things up a little.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
People change when they get uncomfortable.
yeah, I know.
They do.
I know. I'm not sure that I've completely neutralized the word for myself because it totally depends on the context, right? If someone's going to send a nasty message or talk about themselves like, oh my God, I'm so fat, when they're clearly a lot smaller than I am, right? Something like that. Like, I don't like that word. I don't want to use that word. But I think playing around with it, experimenting, sometimes not just with this word, but you'll try something or like, this is like the new me, I'm going to use this phrase. And then you're like, no, that's not me. Actually, I'm never going to use that again.
Yeah. But you don't know till you try.
You don't know till you try. Yeah. And it's a process. It's a big learning process for me, as you can tell by crying, right? Like developing this just deep inherent love for myself, regardless of size, because of my size, all of that. It's going to take my whole life probably, right? It's a process that has to be worked through. And that word holds so much weight because that was the worst thing we could imagine.
Yes.
Right? Like I said, as a kid, I wasn't even quite sure what it meant, but I knew it was the worst thing that could happen to me by far.
Yeah.
And I was a big supporter of this well through my 20s. So I think talking about it, explaining it, even just being a fat person in my social circle, at work, wherever I am, I think that already brings it up, right?
Yeah.
It's not like nobody noticed. Everybody's gonna notice. I'm 6 feet tall. When I walk in a room, people are gonna notice me. Yeah. Whether I like it or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, like, be gentle on yourselves. Yeah. Everybody, there needs to be a little bit of, like, loving kindness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even as a thin person who's trying to figure out, how the heck do I talk about my plus size friend or partner or whatever? Am I allowed to say fat? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, just be kind to yourself. Your intentions are going to show through, right? When your intentions are that you hate yourself and you don't feel that you're worthy of love, that's going to show. Yeah. It's going to show externally and internally. And so other way around too, if your intentions are out of love, if your intentions are good, asking questions and stuff you're going to be fine. Yeah. Give yourself a bit of the 6 seconds, take a breath. Yes. You're going to be okay. Yeah.
Take a breath. Yeah. I find the way you explain that really resonated with me because when I was telling Sarah when we first sat down and chatted before filming about how I was trying to explain her to a friend of mine that I was saying, I'm going to go film a podcast tomorrow. And my first thought was, you know what? She's actually the first person I ever came out to. Like, that is how you come across is warm and welcoming. And there is no descriptor better than talking about someone's intentions and talking about someone's, like, how do they come across as a soul, as a person? And you've nailed it. You've absolutely come across as a beautiful person, and it shows inside and out, as you said. It comes across. Happy sap anyway. Yeah. That is our time. We're gonna have to say goodbye. I could do this for hours, and I've had such a good time. Me and too. I feel like I've learned more about you and about experiences that I don't have. And I really appreciate you opening up and being willing to sit down with me.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Where can people find you on the interwebs?
You can find me on Instagram and TikTok, although I put more on my Instagram. My name is Fat and Sassy.
Yes. I will make sure it's linked in all of the descriptions. Please go and follow her. Please diversify your feeds to the best of your abilities. It is good for the soul and good for growth and all those good things. You can find us at Say It I Dare You Pod on Instagram and TikTok. Please download these episodes is really helpful and leave a review. Thank you all again for your patience with season 2, and thank you again, Sarah, for being here.
Thank you.
Bye.